as the executive arm reveals its hand in their affairs. Later, back in time, on Timer, and a reflection of my panel right here on the cartoon of the week. But first, my take. Now, the decision of the controversial fuel tax and the wide array of austerity measures to plug huge budget deficits lies with Parliament, which has taken the Finance and Budget Committee to unlock the impasse that threatens the nation's economic well-being. Now, the committee must now rise to the occasion and confront the brutal reality of the state of the economy dispassionately and without recourse to party or regional considerations. Now, the facts of the matter are pretty clear. A proposal by the National Treasury to introduce 16% value-added tax on petroleum products was ill-advised and poses some serious challenges to this economy, which is the reason the president, that's Uhuru Kenyatta, is offering a counter-proposal to reduce the levy by half, in effect seeking to meet the public halfway. But this also has not gone down well with many. On his part, President Uhuru Kenyatta has argued that the MPs chose an easier path when they passed the Finance Bill 2018, which vetoed any levy on VAT on petroleum products, that the MPs cannot run away from confronting harsh realities and making difficult decisions. Thus, his argument is that consumers must pay some levy for fuel, that it's not impossible to run the economy, or it's not possible to run the economy without seeking alternatives, even if that is going to be painful. Now, our argument has always been that the 16% VAT was unjustified. Reducing it to 8%, if at all it was a reduction, is not any better. This must now be debated soberly. Taxation and more taxation is not the answer to budget gaps. Alternatively, alternatives must be found, which in our view must start with cost cutting and prioritizing expenditures. This is why the next conversation about budget cuts makes sense, and in this context, President Uhuru Kenyatta made a raft of proposals to raise additional funds to meet the budget deficit. He itemized vote heads to slash among them the Constituency Development Fund that is managed by the members of Parliament. Included in the list recurrent costs such as travel, workshops, salaries, and social subsidies, as well as capital projects like the Konza City and digital literacy. In essence, the government must look inwards and ask questions, and they must be tough questions. What are the priority areas? What can it deliver in the short and long term? Such conversations must be divorced from politics, which in reality is part of the problem affecting this country. Now, we ask the members of Parliament to look at the proposal critically and make realistic decisions. We abhor a situation where they debate with self-interest, like shooting down the proposals in their entirety just because CDF, for example, is being slashed. Importantly, they should give productive proposals to move the conversation. In the words of Jairam Ramesh, an Indian economist and politician, there never is a good time for tough decisions. There will always be an election or something else. You have to pick courage and do it. Governance is about taking tough or even unpopular decisions. My guests tonight, Moses Kuria, Waweru, Miruri, Anzetse Were, and Kwame Owino. My name is Ken Mijungu. Welcome to our program. Cyber begins right now.
The government has to do what Kenyan families across the country are doing, which is to cut what we can't afford. The government committed to reform parastatals by eliminating unnecessary ones and merging others. This should be completed as soon as possible. The government must tame its appetite for big borrowing. If nothing is done on these proposals, NASA will remove a motion in the next budget to scrap VAT on fuel entirely.
We have agreed that the 5 areas that the President is returning to Parliament based on the Finance Bill 2018 in exercise of his powers under Article 115 of the Constitution, we are going to support it. So you can imagine if the Jubilee Party supports the President then it will be a difficult task for any other member to raise the required 233 members to object the presidential memoranda and referral.
Right, a good place to begin. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take your positions first in the 8% VAT. So I'll begin with you. What's your position, the 8%?
Well, I think the position is it's still
just for it or against it?
Obviously against it.
Against it. Okay, I'll come to your point. Moses, for it or against the 8% VAT?
Before I answer you, Ken.
Yes.
I like to be forthright.
Yes.
I would like to take exception.
Okay.
And I don't want to interfere with the editorial policy.
Yes.
Of you laying out as NTV.
Yes.
A very strong commentary or op-ed really at the beginning of a talk show like this.
Okay.
Because you're already prejudiced.
Does it direct how you make your conversation?
I believe, and I will know one or two things about media.
Okay.
I think it's professionally wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, because already you prejudice.
Okay.
Our viewers.
Okay.
Because you have said everything.
All right.
In fact, I was wondering what else do you want us to say?
Take it.
Yeah?
Take it.
So
take it, Moses.
Just for hygiene.
Sometimes it appears we don't really take the topics that we're discussing actively. This was just important. That's all.
But the human mind only works in a certain way.
It's prejudice.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's prejudice. So anyway, I will ignore that. But yes. I thought it's important that I make that exception. Yeah. But personally, I believe people should pay taxes.
People should pay taxes.
Yeah, and there's a pain we have to pay for our development.
Okay.
And it's time to be honest and candid to each other about where we are.
We're coming to that.
Yeah.
You are for taking the taxes.
Yeah.
Waweru.
I'll speak on my behalf.
Yes, just a yes or no, whether you are for it or against it. We're going to go to the discussion.
I'm against.
You're against
an
it.
Approach an approach where, as a media person, you should force me to state my answer.
No, it's important
yes
for this
no.
discussion.
Now listen.
Yes.
I was just stating what I'm saying. On Third Way Alliance, I'm speaking on my behalf and Third Way Alliance. Our position is no, no, no. No, no, no. All right, Ms. Waring.
I think you've oversimplified the context, and I think you've really made it a useless question in terms of what you're actually asking, because it's a very complex and dynamic process.
We'll get to the complexity and dynamic.
But all I'm saying is
yes.
that the question you're asking is not particularly useful because you're not getting the context. So
we'll get the context. Just take a position.
My position is I'm not for it.
You're not for it.
Yeah.
Okay, not for it, and for it. Let me begin with Moses. Is for it. Moses, what did you know? Because long before this happened, and I'll quote you on your Facebook page, you said that you will not be pretending, or you will be pretending to turn around and start to cry with the rest of the Kenyans on the VAT. At that time, it was 16%. And you said, tell those pretentious leaders to man up or woman up and stop treating you as a fool. What did you know, Moses?
All I know is not some rocket science or some nuclear secret. I sit in the Budget and Appropriations Committee, the National Assembly. And in February, we passed what you call the BPS, the Budget Policy Statement. And also we passed at the same time what we call MTDS, the Medium-Term Debt Strategy.
Okay.
So those are like the compass that guides our budgeting process.
Okay.
So way back in February, I knew the amount of money that we would require to run our budget. And we approved that. No noise, no question. Then we came now to 30th of April, and CS Rotich tabled the annual estimates for financial year 2018-2019. Again, we saw 3-point-something trillion, and we could see it is quite some some aggressive budget in terms of where we want to be, and we had all the big four items there, and everybody is saying, oh, we support the president of the big four. So all along, I knew that we would require to raise substantial amount of money. Then how do I now turn around and say, let me cry with you because of taxes?
Okay.
And it is just the input-output. The revenue required is a function of the expenditure. So, I would be pretentious. And I said, I'm not.
That's exactly the problem, is that all the definition of fiscal policy, mainly in the past 5 years, has been aggressive expenditure expansion, okay, with no real appreciation of the serious constraints that the KRA has with revenue generation, okay. So we've got this aggressive expansion in expenditure, we've got subpar revenue generation, which has been acknowledged year on year on year. And so we've got this excessive borrowing. And so one of the concerns I've had more broadly in terms of fiscal policy, because you're trying to narrow such a very narrow conversation that I don't think really gives the full scope of what we're talking about, is that we've got a pattern of fiscal policy that's unsustainable. Now, from a fiscal point of view, tax in terms of revenue generation is logical, but from a moral point of view, it is absolutely illogical, because the real fundamental question that we're trying to address is, are we on a sustainable fiscal path? And in my view, the answer is no. We are very aggressively in expenditure expansion. We are not producing the revenue required to feed that expenditure, and therefore we're getting into excessive borrowing in a context where tax revenue generation is a big question. If you look at the extent to which government taxing actually generates revenue, does government have the figure in terms of at what point is that inflection point where taxing becomes negative? Okay, so there's a point at which you can tax, increase revenue generation, and at some point, at the inflection point, you actually begin to dampen economic activity. And the question I have as a sober analyst with no political sort of alliances is, has government done the work to figure out what is that inflection point? At what point can we say, as a Kenyan public, that beyond this taxation point, revenue generation will no longer happen? And that's what I'm feeling is missing from the conversation, is a very objective Laffer curve analysis around what is the optimal point of taxation. And I think that's why...
Does it exist anywhere?
I think we could figure it out. I think honestly, if you gave us that task, we could figure it out.
All right, as professionals around it, as economists. All right.
You know, with all due respect, I respect Honorable Moses Kuria and his approach and how he has owned up to how they approved the budget is actually very good for the public to know that Parliament approved the sources of revenue and the sources of expenditure. Because I'm finding it absurd that some members of Parliament are actually disowning what they approved in Parliament. Because when you are rejecting this finance bill...
they've come around and most of them are...
Listen very carefully. There is even the appropriations bill. Where they approved the revenues and expenditure, and it was signed into law by the president. So you cannot come later on to start revising what you already approved. What we are actually talking about is this. We have some element of dishonest members of Parliament in this country who don't actually understand even their business. At least Moses Kuria understands
those are the people you're calling out, right?
Yes.
The people you're calling out.
Listen, but we have a position as Third Way Alliance. You know, in budgeting, you don't only look at the revenue side. As an accountant, I'll tell you, there are two sides in business or even in running government. There's revenue and expenditure. Let's look at like the SGR. We looked at the beauty of the SGR, whereas we could have done it at a lesser cost. With 30 billion shillings, we could have run an SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi. Because what is an SGR? Is the width of the railway. Just replacing the 1 meter with 1.3. It costed us 3 billion instead of 30 billion. Moses Kuria, as a member of Parliament and a knowledgeable person, would have told the public, let us not, and the government, because you know Moses Kuria is an elected member of Parliament by the people of Gatundu. He does not represent the executive, although he's a member of Jubilee.
We'll talk about that. Let me have your comment on this.
Okay, I think for me, this was coming. And my view is that what we are dealing with right now is dealing with a one-time crisis. But the truth is, this is coming. And a little more trouble is going to come. The most important thing is, are we really prepared for it? So let me say, in addition to what Anzette said, one of the things that has driven the deficit that we had is we started running deficits in the hundreds of billions 5-6 years ago. And if you bake in 400 billion, then 500 billion, last year we had a deficit of close to 800 billion. This year we are back to 600 billion. You run out of time. You run out of time in the sense that you sooner have to pay much, much more than you can actually get in revenue. So that's the first point. So in the first point, Parliament is not without blame here.
Okay.
Treasury, every time Treasury gave them a number, They took the number, provided they got Parliament's budget done.
Except this year, I don't think they took the numbers this year, whatever they were given.
Well, but look, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this, for instance. I'm really concerned that if you look at the budget numbers, and Moses has mentioned quite well outlined, but every time Treasury presents a budget statement, so for instance, the data in the budget statement, in the speech that the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury read before Parliament, so one was supposed to be 3 trillion. Then when he spoke about it during the budget speech, it was about 2.6 trillion, and now it's back to about 2.8. I mean, no, his statement today in the Kenya Gazette suggests that he's actually bringing it back to 2.9. So basically, even these numbers are all over, and you're dealing with hundreds of billions. It's not small change. Okay. So a lot of errors have been baked in here, and that suggests to me that we have not been neat. I think some serious thing is coming. So the second point, though, is this. Parliament is not without blame, so in a way, Moses is taking responsibility, and that's a good thing. But the one thing that worries me is, it is also not true that just because parliamentarians have accepted something, we the taxpayers should accept it. Amen. We have obligations as well, and we have rights as citizens to say that level of tax is not what we want to bear.
Even if they're accepting on your behalf.
Yes, it will be counterproductive. Because what it means,
see, under Article 1 of the Constitution,
what it means is, you might want to build an SGR, you might want to build the Big Four. I don't know who we are building houses for. You might want to build that, but if somebody in a city or in a place in Kenya is telling you that I'm going to have to walk to work, or my child is going to have to leave school, they have a right to protest that huge budget that you're giving them. So, and that's what Kenyans are doing.
You didn't even finish your point.
You see, the problem we have in this whole debate, first of all, I'm very, very happy with where we are as a country, because we are debating thoroughly economic issues. You know, we were at the parliamentary group meeting today, and I counted up to 10 apparent PhD economists, you know, from within the parliamentary group, you know. And this is something for me I've been crying for a long time, the lack of discourse on economic matters. We are very good at discussing political issues, social issues, but when it comes to economic issues, you know, we just flip over things and we don't. So I'm very happy that now we are getting into the territory that I want us to get into. Issues of our fiscal regime, issues about, you know, our tax regime. These are a very welcome point of view. But then again, simply because we think we have a problem on our borrowing, or simply because we think we need to do a value for money audit of our public investment, does not mean that we can put the country into some snooze mode, because we are a going concern as a country. Yeah. So, and you wonder, I think that is what Kwame is trying to say to some extent. All these years, before we have this particular issue of taxation, do we have this honest discussion about, for example, our borrowing?
Yes, we have.
Are we seized of it as a nation? Are we seized of it as a nation?
No.
Because, you know, the issue is, this is not a country for Ken Mijungu or Uhuru Kenyatta or Anzetse or Kwame here.
Or you.
It's a country for all of us.
Yes, yeah? Exactly.
It's a country for all of us. Yeah. So I would want to see a situation whereby this discourse is continuous. And all the time.
Let me tell you something.
Not 1 minute. Yeah. So when now we start saying we are raising taxes, oh, what about borrowing? Where were you before?
We were always there.
Then we start saying, you know, we were raising taxes. But what have you got? But
we have been there.
Take it this way, Ken.
Yes.
You know, Azet is talking about, for example,
fiscal policy.
Fiscal policy and expenditure. 5 years ago, and Kwame is talking about 5 years ago. Yeah, we are now in 2018. That's right. 8 years ago.
Exactly.
We had a parliament of 210 members. We had some few councillors whom we were paying 30,000 shillings a month. Yeah, we had only one level of parliament. We had one tier of government. Now we have got governors, 47 counties. I don't know. 1,450 elected MCAs and an equal number of nominated MCAs. Yeah. So
this is
I'll let you start. Let me say, Moses, I would forgive you. Moses,
I'll speak to you.
I would forgive you, Moses. I have to tell you the truth. You're not being honest. I would forgive you if you're not in the last parliament. You were there. This is what happened in the last parliament. The same excuse about the constitution being the cause of large public spending was asked by parliamentarians. You all passed a motion and specifically asked the Auditor General to actually audit the new constitution. I know this because I was privileged and actually asked to respond to the report, to critique the report. I was surprised myself when he found that actually what was driving expenditure was not the new positions. What was driving expenditure was the big infrastructure projects that we had chosen. So please forgive the constitution. Don't blame the constitution for your faults. That's not acceptable.
You know, as much as I would like to reason out with Moses Kuria, Honorable Moses Kuria, there's one thing that he'd actually agree. Making of laws in this country is the forte of the parliament.
Yeah.
Who signs laws and arouse members of parliament? In the first parliament where Moses Kuria served, in 2013, they increased their salaries. The person who signs the law is their party leader, the president, Uhuru Kenyatta. They allowed themselves to be paid so much such that the parliament becomes now set a precedent that MCAs need to demand more. In such that you set a precedent that every public servant now needs to get more money from the public coffers. It's not no longer about service. It's a job. If you think you can get a corporate job which can pay you $1 million, leave the parliament business. This is actually part of the proposal that we say we did in our presser today in Third Way. If you think you can earn $1 million shillings outside parliament, go get that job in the corporate, go do business, get it. What we proposed as Third Way today is, let's pay members of parliament not more than 300,000 shillings.
That's a specific proposal. I need to take a break, but I'll give you a chance to respond.
I think, broadly speaking, if we look at the actual problem that the Kenyan public has beyond allocation, which is what we're saying, is an actual spending problem. If you look at the concerns of the Kenyan people, we can squabble about allocations all day and say, oh, we should have done this and we should allocate this to that. But the reality is that there's a spending problem both in recurrent spending and in development spending. So if you look at the recurrent spending, we can't even account for pens and biros, right? If you look at development spending, we look at hugely inflated project costs. So until that reality is made more feasible, the questions will continue to come out.
All right, Moses, I'd like to take a break.
Maybe
can I take
this is what I would want us to dwell. Between
And
recurrent and development.
Let's take a break.
I think that's the crux of the matter.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I'd like to discuss that. Plus, a lot of Kenyans are now saying that the divide, that you guys can't allow me to say that Kenyans, you know, because people share different opinions about the cut, about the VAT cut by 50%. So I'd like to talk about that because a lot of Kenyans are lost and are thinking that this is actually a reduction. It's not a reduction. I'd like to point out that. Then we come back and discuss. Do we have feedback? All right, let's take a look at this, some feedback, then we take a break. Right, we have, this is on Twitter, that Dynamo say, you increase taxes, inflation shoots, leading to increased strikes, the value of our currency decreases. I don't know how that's practical. It follows that way. And Rodnam says tax everywhere, but no accountability. Funding Big Four is utopian for a country riddled with Chinese debts. I'd like to talk about the specifics that he's referring to. And the last one from Edward Muhoi says fuel tax is no longer the issue. Salaries about to drop by 1.5%, and pesa charges to rise by 10%, and kerosene etc. I think those are the things we showed very broad graphics on what the president wants. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll start from Moses Sat. Current versus development. Right, let's take a break. All right, welcome back to Sidebar. Let's take a look at this before we continue.
The people of Kenya will again look up to their MPs to see if they are thinking the way they are thinking. And if the MPs now abandon them, that will be very unfortunate. Now the only recourse that people of Kenya have will be to go to the street. We have also realized that the president is at some predicament. Why? Because we are discussing revenue raising measures late in the day when already the budget is approved. Therefore, hence we have given the government that space of 1 year as they carry out some reforms, within which time we hope things will be done properly.
All right, that's where we find ourselves today. Even the members of parliament who had made it clear at the beginning that they'll leave this to the members of parliament to make a decision, they've taken a bow turn and sort of they're going one way. I'm waiting to count on my left and right hand how many members of parliament will be on the other side when the debate finally comes to the floor on Thursday. But let me bring that conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with that. But first, I'd like to understand, why are Kenyans right now thinking that this is actually a reduction? Because there's a section of Kenyans who are celebrating and say, guys, like Mbadi who has just spoken, there's a realization, there's need to work with the president to raise the revenue streams and all. Why are they thinking that this is a good thing for Kenya? Let me begin with you, because the last time we had the discussion on 16% here.
Okay. Yes, I think it's the way the communication was done. Because the first thing, when Parliament passed the law, they intended for the 16% not to work, right? Remember, right now it was zero. It was zero on 31st of August. On the 1st of September, because of a law that would, because of a deferment that was done 2 years ago in 2016, it was to get to 16. So right now there's been a negotiation, and part of what the president is saying is fine. We've heard that 16% would be hurtful to Kenyans, so what he's proposing is to bring it down to 8%. It is not a reduction. Okay. Because what he's saying is I'm raising it from 0 to 8 and not from 0 to 16.
Okay. But even the 8%, there are a lot of people who are saying it's not still workable. There's a lot of discontented voices about this. I don't know, Moses, it's the same thing to you where we were 16, so long as people are paying taxes, or?
You see, the proposal that came with the finance bill, and you know it's the executive that originated the finance bill. Yes. It came with 16%. Then it went to finance committee, which is a committee in parliament that is responsible for taxation.
And you sit there?
I don't sit
there. No, you sit in the budget and the appropriation, yes.
And that's another story we have to talk about. Okay. Because what Bandi is saying, and I've said it again and again. Yes. You can't have two committees in parliament, one for expenditure and one for revenue. Okay. And that's why you have got this kind of, one short leg and one long leg in terms of our budget making process. Because we pass appropriations 3 months before we debate taxation. Okay. So that, even from a household perspective, is senseless. Yeah. Okay. Because you need to, the same people who are looking at revenue.
Which one should come first? Which
no, it's supposed to be together.
Go together at the same
balance,
time.
You know.
Okay. At the same time.
I put in amendments in the last parliament, in the 11th parliament. I put in amendment to our rules and procedures to merge our finance and budget committee so that we are able to.
Was it rejected together? Because then members will be
rejected. It was rejected by members, and that's what we are paying for. Yeah, that's what we are paying for right now. Well, it's a democratic parliament and people have to vote, but it was rejected. So finance committee did commit to the House the same proposal of 16% that was passed by Treasury. So it is actually the Honorable Junaid Mohammed who made an amendment to reduce from 16% to zero. But what they didn't say is now, because now I've reduced all these 16 to 0, what am I going to do to all the spending that was pegged on that? Okay. And bearing in mind...
Was there a spending? This was a cautionary loan. Was there a spending that was pegged on it, really?
No, what I'm saying is taxation is for funding expenditure. Yes. Yeah. Which expenditure we had already passed.
But you see, this is the wrong notion of taxation. You see, you're assuming taxation is for government expenditure for debt approval and for debt alleviation. The actual funding, in my view, of tax is for human actual implementation of health education for the citizens. One of the fundamental problems I'm having around this conversation is that everybody seems to agree that we should tax to get rid of our debts. Now the fundamental problem I have is I know you didn't say that, but the overriding logic that seems to be governing this conversation is that we need to getting a more sustainable fiscal position, which I appreciate and I understand. But when you look at it from a citizen's point of view, is that I'm paying my tax, I'm being the responsible citizen, what do I get in return for my tax? And if all I get in return for my tax is for some big ballooned government project that never had any impact on me, of course you're going to get resistance. So I think there's a lack of sort of a realism around the reality between paying taxes and expecting a dividend on that tax.
Your manifesto actually had a proposal on this long before we went for the election.
You are the only thinking party during the last year's elections, because the other parties like Jubilee and NASA, they were relying on tribal numbers. So we had great ideas. We talked about phasing out, abolishing VAT and bringing in 3% sales tax across the board, on goods and services, so that we can shield ordinary citizens from high cost of living.
But that will be across the board, will be very practical, especially when you have different cadres of goods, right?
Listen. You know, there's no country in the world which was developed by overtaxing its own people. Because people have to have disposable income, lest you go overseas to look for investors. Like
the president gave examples in the memo of countries such as Ghana that have achieved this by...
Is Ghana a developed country?
No, it's not developed, but they're just
listen, I can give you an example of Singapore, which has different methods of taxation. In fact, their GSD or GST, which is the equivalent of VAT, is 7% across the board. So don't go to an area that you are not an expert in.
No, I'm not an expert, but I'm telling you,
let us tackle our problems.
We're tackling our problem, but you don't dismiss me. It's a question. The president gave examples of countries he looks at and says, this is a result of the VAT.
But they are not model countries that have developed
but doesn't stop me from raising
the US, which is the most developed country in the world, in high mass consumption, uses sales tax. You cannot now take us to failed countries.
That's their mode.
No, listen. But it is the example in the world of the most developed country in the world using sales tax. Because you tax
but did they start with the sales tax?
No, listen.
No. Did they start with the sales tax? So they had another tax before that.
Listen, what we want also, I want to also
you cannot direct the conversation the way you want. We need to get information. So if you're going to tell us US, if you're going to tell us about the US, just tell us also about where they started and where they are.
Can you listen? You know, the reason you hosted us is not to express your opinion.
I want to ask fundamental questions. You cannot assume
you could not have hosted us. You could have sat here and expressed your opinion.
Without telling us everything. You have to explain to us.
Listen, you have to understand things logically. I wanted to move you to a next level, thing which Moses Kuria really understands. When they did the division of revenue bill this year, Third Way Alliance is on record having opposed the base on which they used the 2013-2014 revenue.
Okay.
The other body that opposed that is the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. The reason we opposed is because Article 229 of the Constitution of Kenya says that division of revenue must be based on the most recent audited accounts. And the auditor is given 6 months to audit, and Parliament is only given 3 months to review and debate audits and approve. Ask Moses Kuria, Honorable Moses Kuria, who is here. The last time they debated audited accounts was 2013-2014. Then you continue budgeting without reviewing how you are spending. It is full handy in anywhere in the world. Go and ask any listed company in this country whether they don't review their budget based on how they expended in the previous year. That is what is good management practice. Moses Kuria is a... listen.
Let me say this.
No, let me complete.
You have spoken. You made your point. Yes, Moses. Yes.
I am tolerant to misrepresentation of facts, because maybe mostly that is what but when I'm discussing professionals, I don't expect
they shouldn't like that is a
misrepresentation, because even now
they consider
even now as we speak, and I'm going to talk about the cuts, because like now for CDF it's supposed to be 2.5% of last reported revenue, and 2017-2018 has been closed. Those are the numbers.
Closed in terms of?
I mean, those are the numbers are in.
Just hold. Revenue was based on 2013-2014.
Just hold. We listen to Moses when we come to you.
How long have you been in, my friend? The last time we had this problem.
Moses, we went to Senate.
No.
You have to
the last time we had this problem.
Yes.
Was I think in the year 2015 when we were discussing the division of revenue for 2015. That is the year, and I was sitting in the budget committee when we couldn't agree really. Some people are saying we are sending less money to the counties. Others were saying no. So we are asking which auditor reports were we talking about? At that time, Edward Ouko, the auditor and control, the auditor general, had a backlog, which has since been cleared. So let us not dwell on historical issues.
Okay.
But now, some other misrepresentation of facts. Where else do you expect any government to get money other than from taxation?
Okay.
Because the way we keep on saying, no government succeeds from taxes. The primary source, the main source,
is the taxing.
In fact, the most legitimate source of revenue.
Okay.
For any government. To any government.
Yes. Is taxing.
Remember that old maxim. And that's why people are fighting even for democracy.
Yes.
No representation, no taxation, without representation.
We are going to ask you for the solutions. We are going to ask you about other revenue streams. We'll talk about that.
We can discuss two things. Ken, please, if I would seek your indulgence.
Yes.
We can discuss on how much to tax how. Yeah? We can discuss on what to do with the taxes, for example. Capital expenditure vis-a-vis what is being called, big expenditure project. But let us not delegitimize taxation, because any government, the Bible says, and to Caesar,
what belongs to Caesar. First confirm to me,
yes.
What is the last budget statement that we based this on?
The last audited accounts that were completed is the year 15-16.
15-16.
So that is not so it was based on the division of revenue bill.
Yes,
we did a memorandum based on the published bill by National Parliament, which was based on 2013-2014. And that is what passed. You see, listen, if you're not in the know, let us agree, because that is a published bill.
Nobody knows budgets in this country.
In overall.
Institute of
but what do you think is that? No, listen, this is a published bill.
You have.
But this was a published bill.
Can we give you
number 7?
Let's other people. Let me state my point and you can say yours.
But this was my time to speak.
No, it was comments. You had.
It was my time. Look, guys. The point is this. This is not. You did not provide us with a platform for us to show what we know. Everybody here gets involved in the budget process, and if he doesn't know the Institute of Economic Affairs, that's his problem. But let me tell you this: we've been doing budget representations to Parliament for close to 20 years. Actually, 20 years since this year. So there's very little you can tell us about budgets. Let's be honest with each other. But the point is this: the last completed Auditor General's reports, which basically Parliament handled, was 15-16.
15-16.
Yes, that's completed. Now, so let's keep that on the side. So you are 1 year behind. But anyway, the point is this.
From what we are discussing.
The point is this. Our biggest problem which surfaces as this VAT problem is actually our public spending. Every year we are spending 400 billion shillings more than we are collecting. It is going to catch up with you. Just like if you're spending more than what your wages are.
Yes.
And then secondly, you've run out of cheap options of lending. So you're going to Shylocks.
Because of your excessive spending.
Because of your excessive spending. So what you're dealing with is a tax problem showing up.
Exactly.
A spending problem showing up.
As a
tax problem.
Okay.
So basically what we have is we have baked in spending in here. So let's talk about 2014-15. In 2014-15, again, to show our stripes, the government was paying 300 billion shillings every year, which is part of the consolidated fund services, which the constitution says we must do first, the non-discretionary expenditure, 300 billion. This year, 870. 870 billion in 4 years. Why? Because if you borrow money from Paul, we have to pay. That's basically the point. So it's reducing budget flexibility.
Okay.
So while you are doing that, you are investing in these huge budget projects. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, Kenyans need to understand this. It is true. Kenyan parliamentarians, including Moses, are very comfortable. They're paid very well. However, all factors considered, even if you abolished parliament today, you only save 30 billion. Our budget deficit is 700 billion. 20 times what Parliament spends.
So
the problem is this, you can't do with it by simple things such as cut a few things here, cut a few things there. What it tells you is it requires restructuring about how the state is. We can't be throwing money at problems.
And may I add to what you're saying? I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think the fundamental problem that we're not addressing is development expenditure. Everybody is obsessed with recurrent expenditure in terms of wages and trips and, you know, workshops. But the actual elephant in the room is development expenditure. If you look at the capacity of inflation of costs, if you look at the capacity for financial mismanagement in development expenditure, which by nature is less scrutinized than recurrent expenditure, the actual elephant in the room in terms of where our spending is going is actually development expenditure. Because one of the reasons that happens is because those are often bilateral, multilateral deals that are not private or not exposed to the public for scrutiny. And so when these development deals are done, we often don't know what we're getting into. And that is the scope for financial mismanagement that happens. That really is the elephant in the room that's not being addressed.
I would actually agree with both of them. You see, during the Kibaki era 10 years, Kibaki did the Thika superhighway. And if you to extend the Thika highway just using just 2 lanes, that's about a 400-kilometer road, which costed 27 billion. That would tell you literally that this government has been doing a lot of nothing. Because the Thika road, you can spread it from Nairobi to about Mariakani, or the same way the Mombasa road is now.
If you have to do one way.
One way. Yes. At a cost of 27 billion. But when it comes to the costs in this government, they are little, huge costs. Even per kilometer, I think the new road from Mombasa is coming to a billion. Almost $1 billion per kilometer. I think such a cost. You see, when cost overruns, because you know the public, most of the members of the public have no skill to understand these engineering concepts. And this is why we are saying, for us to get even tax bases, this is a government that is running on thinking that you can convince people that we have to raise taxes. That is true. People have to pay taxes. But now, how we as a government encouraged to create to expand our tax base. Let me give you an example. The Chinese did the levy from Mombasa to Nairobi for 3 years plus. The University of Nairobi here has trained engineers for 50 years. We do not encourage technology transfer. Now, it would be our record guys doing from Nairobi to the next border, and we will collect the tax from that. Let me ask another question to the public, which they need to understand. Out of the 320 billion that was used to construct the railway from Mombasa to Nairobi, did the Chinese company make any profit? If they made, ordinarily in business, you would make even a net profit of 30% or 25%. If they made a tax, a profit out of the whole project, about 60 billion, did the Chinese company pay 30% of that?
That's on that.
On that, they should have been the largest taxpayer, even more than Safaricom.
Talking about illicit financial flow.
Yes, you see what we are saying. This is illicit because there's a crime here. Because the China Bridge and Road Company could have paid some tax to this country out of that project.
Okay, what if they
pay?
Talk to me about this. They financed it, they sourced for the loans and built it themselves.
Yeah, that does not give them an exemption from income tax. They were doing business in Kenya.
Okay, so they should pay.
They should pay
business
tax.
in Kenya should pay tax.
Yes.
Okay.
Out of the 320 billion, if you make 30% of that, that is 90 billion. 90 billion times 30, that's about 27 billion.
Let's look at the realistic capacity of the KRA. One of the fundamental problems around tax accrual that government is having is the capacity of the KRA. So they've thought, let's finance the KRA to expand their mandate. What they don't understand is that it's quite easy to hide money in Kenya. If you're very wealthy and you've got international connects, it's quite easy to hide money. And then on the other end, if you're very poor and you're not in the PIN system and sort of the formal government system, it's also quite easy to hide money. So the fundamental question is this, that government is not asking itself, is what do we need to do to get people to understand that it is in their benefit to pay taxes? That is a question government is not answering because they're busy obsessing with all the debts and all these things that they have to. And the common manage is like, well, I really didn't benefit from like Thika or anything.
Why do you want more
so
from me?
the incentive is to continue hiding. Whether you're a big boy and you can do illicit financial flows, or whether you're really small and you can sort of hide your income, the incentive is not there from government.
I think, look, for me, this is not a taxation problem. This is a spending problem. And let me tell you what we do. The appropriations, the law that the President signed after Parliament passed, right? If you look at those laws and go about it line by line, I think there's 16,000 lines. We tried to add them up. If you went through them line by line, you see very odd things. So for instance, there's a state corporation, right? Which has a state corporation, which has about 340 employees based on public information that's available from their website, right? But they're spending 9 million shillings per month on telecommunications. Obviously, that's a spending problem. So you may be able to raise taxes, but should you raise taxes to pay for this kind of expenditure? So my view is, if we don't discipline spending, you could tax people until you take away their share. So that's the first. Yeah. The second problem for me is this. If we went about, I actually think from the Institute of Economic Affairs, all the things that government wants to do, all the things that government wants to do in this year could be done for 2 billion. I mean, sorry, for 2 trillion. The extra trillion that we are correcting, we are simply collecting that money so that it can be diverted to other people.
Okay.
So we must discipline spending. If we don't do that, it doesn't matter how much we try to collect taxes.
I cannot agree more on the issue of spending. Yeah, we have a huge spending problem in this country. Frivolous, unwarranted, unwanted spending. But I disagree on with Azete on the issue of whether it is recurrent or development. By the way, the 3 trillion shilling that we're talking about, whether it's 2.9 or whatever, only 650 billion will go to development spending. The rest of it, the whole bulk of it, is all about salaries and travel and allowances. So please, let us not bastardize capital expenditure.
Okay.
Excuse me, my friend. Because I feel very strong about this issue. Because in fact, we should be happy to borrow for capital expenditure. Because at least we didn't all...
We are already doing it.
Yes. Because at least we didn't eat everything. For our generation. At least we are not something.
We are borrowing for recurrence.
As Kenyans, we are not borrowing for recurrence. Yes, left to our own devices. If we don't at least borrow for capital assets, something which my grandchildren can see tomorrow, we are going to consume everything we have and disappear with it from the current generation. But look at it this way.
Yes.
Every time, as members of parliament, today we were in State House for parliamentary group. Yes. After the meeting, you see around 100 members of parliament following the president. Hey, Mheshimiwa Rais, barabara yangu. Mheshimiwa Rais, my water. Mheshimiwa Rais, this. And you know, today he really made me happy. He told them, where do you want me to get the money from?
You have the money.
No, everybody is talking about my road, my this, my that. So when it comes to our development, we are the first one to go and ask for it. When we are told now, let us look for ways through which we are able to finance that particular road, that particular
road. Can we discipline our spending?
I would like to
just in a few seconds.
We complete this session and make something very clear about taxation.
Yes.
Because we are talking about taxation to raise revenues. I've made a case on the issue of taxing these CLBC companies. You know, in Kenya, there's a law that even when you declare dividends, that they must be taxed. So you don't just pay the 30%. We are ignoring a very important point. What we should actually see now is the government coming with a plan. Every person who gets $1 billion worth of a contract, we should monitor the tax he pays.
Okay.
Because now, these are the leakages. You know, ignorance of facts is what really brings us down.
Okay.
Say we have done projects of 600 billion. What was the tax paid?
Okay. Okay.
There's no incentive to do that.
There's no...
Because there's no belief in
because
it.
Can I take a break? Because we have to pay the bills. Yeah, we're taking a break. We're coming back with the discussion. Don't worry. Do we have feedback or should we go for the break? All right, let's take a break. We'll be back. We'll be back. All right. But I'm seeing a few on the screen. Let me see this. This is from Protas. It says, look at the thinking by Kurokota and the Third Way Alliance. It looks good, but these cartels want to let loose their grip. Okay, that's all we have. All right, the second one, increased taxation means low purchasing power, high inflation, less savings, etc. All right, and finally, mahali tumefika, we need more economists and accountants than lawyers in parliament. Dissolve parliament. Kwame is going to run. No, he's not a politician. He's not going to run. We're coming back with this discussion. Stay with Sidebar.
Get an 8th acre for 950,000 shillings.
Uhuru Kenyatta should dissolve his current crisis-ridden government to reconstitute and re-engineer it anew to regain a foothold in Kenyans' confidence.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You know, that soundbite from Musalia Mudavadi, I know we're going back to the discussion. When NASA made that statement, we expected a unified statement. We expected that this was NASA. In fact, they kept saying it's a NASA statement, but Musalia Mudavadi had a total different view. In fact, in his statement, even called for Uhuru Kenyatta to dissolve his government based on this, their inability to run a government, right? That's what they said. But let me get back to the discussion because I know we didn't conclude it, and then we can get back. Let me talk to Miruri.
You know, one of the things that I would say is this, although you are mispronouncing my name,
sorry,
is that where I come from, we don't continue discussing dead people. On the case of NASA, I will have no comment about it. In fact, I saw a statement which was done, and I was shocked, like, NASA has admitted kindergarten children to be doing statements for them. I was really shocked because the people I see in NASA, like people who I really admire, like the Honorable Badi, who is a CPA like me, would have done better than this. So you see, we need some level of progressive politics. And the Juha Karuru kind of politics that is happening in this country is what has brought us this far. Because last year we had the whole year to discuss politics. Nobody discussed VAT Act, except Third Way. Nobody discussed issues. They were discussing tribes. They were discussing circumcision. They were discussing nonsense. So when the reality comes, we start discussing issues.
Economists have always been discussing the economy.
No, but listen, it didn't you know, we are talking about taking center stage. What takes center stage in our politics? Because I'm Kikuyu, I get a Kalenjin, or I get another tribe, we form to defeat the other group. Listen, what I'm saying is completely the reality of Kenyan politics, as of now, but we are going to change it. What we are saying is this: we must move. Kwame speaks the language of economics to people in politics. Because what we are discussing here, Kwame is an economist, but he can discuss politics in a civilized way. She can discuss politics the same way we are doing here. Why can't we do this in the years to come so that we change this country for the better? Because if we go on continuing, these issues could have been discussed last year. Instead of saying two-horse race, let us discuss issues. Who is talking sense? Third Way proposed the 3%.
But what is so civilized by calling dead, we're talking about a dead horse or something? No, what is so civilized about that?
No, you see, it is...
They're not here to defend
No, it is completely civilized. Let me tell you. People who don't keep promises. NASA, they have deposited an agreement at ORPP, which they have not lived to it. Do you expect if the 3 or 4 gentlemen who signed that agreement cannot keep their agreement, they can keep an agreement to the larger population?
Okay. Okay.
So that is a dead
okay, let's move to the discussion on what's happening in the country. I know, ladies and gentlemen, you all looked at the raft of measures that was taken by the president, right? In effect, he says we'll be saving about 56 billion shillings, right? The cuts here, cuts there, MPs on CDF, travel expenditure, and all that. Is it even sufficient? Is it just a knee-jerk reaction? Is it something to convince Kenyans that we're headed to the right direction?
May I say that's the wrong focus?
Okay.
Okay, we can squabble about allocations all we want. And we can say, oh, if we did this formula and if we did that formula, it would be better for the country.
Okay.
What actually matters, as you know, Kwame and others have pointed out, is the spending. And so when we look at
those are spending.
Yeah. But you can no. What you're trying to get us to squabble about is the allocation. And what I'm trying to tell you is that the allocation can be perfect. What actually matters is the spending. And we have fundamental problems with spending in both recurrent and development expenditure.
Okay.
In recurrent expenditure, we've got problems where we can't even price a pen appropriately, where a pen becomes a subject of speculation in terms of how much that costs, right? If you look at development expenditure, you look at the capital expenditure that we have to accrue in terms of getting things built in our country and the inflation that happens there. So we can sit here and squabble about, oh, you know, we should use this formula for allocation and that formula. Okay. What actually matters, and the fundamental problem I have, is that we don't have a good track record of tracking our actual spending to inform strategy going forward.
And whether
spending is efficient and whether spending is economically productive, because ultimately the spending will determine the bump on into GDP growth, and we're not doing that analysis.
In your view, even the successive regimes, even Mwai Kibaki's, we didn't have a good way of managing that?
I would agree with you. That's a really good point. I don't think as a government we have a very good history of looking at the economic productivity of our spending and looking at the extent to which government spending informs GDP growth. I think that analysis just doesn't exist.
Okay.
And that is one of the big flaws in that space.
Okay. All right. Now that, I mean, especially because we know Member of Parliament is part of our panel today, one of the things that, so let's concentrate on them, right? You expect an executive government, I mean the executive branch of government to want more money, because then as Treasury you control more projects, you control many more people, you try to control everybody else. That is the reason why our constitutional model puts a lot of responsibility on the part of Parliament, but it wasn't doing it. So let's even say this. So for instance, the year after what Kenyans call NYS 1 came out, right, where a barely literate Kenyan citizen was going into banks and carrying 40 kilograms of cash on her shoulders and walking away with it. That came to the public domain. The next year, that specific department's money, even after the Auditor General found out, was raised by 40% by the same Parliament, which is supposed to have oversight. So basically, Parliament dropped the ball. So we can look right now at the President and make it look like it's all that, but it's actually the tight tension that should exist between the executive and Parliament. This is a Parliament that has never learned to say no to the executive. Provided they get a small increment in CDF, they have their trips approved, they have their cars and loans and everything else approved. So in a way, this is a disappointment of democratic politics, where an institution established to perform democratic functions just refuses to perform it. Parliament just refused to perform it.
Okay. Moses.
I find it very difficult to disagree with Kwame.
Because he's not a member of Parliament.
No, because it's an issue which myself and MP for Rongo, for Abur, sitting in the budget committee, we engineered a move, last month to look at the issues of intra-cycle budget monitoring. Because right now we are morticians. We just wait for...
You've defined budget monitoring by the National Assembly or by Parliament? By National Assembly. By National Assembly.
We are the ones who give... We are the ones, I am the holder of the purse strings.
Yes.
As a member of the budget committee.
Okay.
And so we ask ourselves, the next time I will see Rotich, I see Rotich 5 times a year. I will see him when he's presenting the
budget statement
documents, which he must present. BPS, debt strategy. I'll see him again when he's coming with his estimates so that we can pass them. The next time I'll see him is he comes with twice a year with supplementary. So again, spend more. The next time, something called public participation for another year. Not asking ourselves, within this year, how have we spent what? That's something that has been bothering us. So last week we went to Mombasa. We took 3 days as a committee to Mombasa. And all we are doing is putting together between the Budget and Appropriations Committee and Parliamentary Budget Office, which is a very important office in presidential system. And we're asking ourselves, how can we be able to put together a framework where we are able to, to save the horse before it bolts, instead of closing the barn
when it's already
bolted. And we are trying to establish quarterly milestone review, intra-budget. Because what we're doing before is actually just leaving it now for the Auditor General of the public.
Why is there a sense of a lack of control is what I'm not understanding.
I am with you. All I'm telling you and
may I just say
the current crop we have within the Budget and Appropriation Committee, bar for the small things like John Buddy, who is our member and who is my junior in the business school. But that's not what we taught him. Saying one thing and then coming and saying something else out there. I'm calling for honesty.
Playing politics.
I'm calling for professional honesty, especially for people like Buddy, because that's not how we were trained.
They were whipped,
and credit is credit. But away from that, because that can sidetrack us,
Yes.
We can talk about that until cows come home. What we are saying is the current committee we have for budget and appropriations has realized exactly what you guys are saying.
Yeah, but why? I don't listen. this is the fundamental problem that I'm having, is that this pattern emerged fairly early. Yeah. If you look at the work that I've been doing, the work that Kwame's been doing, a lot of economists have been analyzing the fiscal path of the Kenyan government. I raised this 3 years ago. Okay, I raised this 2 years ago. I raised this. Can I finish?
We have got thinking about it.
No. I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I'm not,
because you said 3 years ago and we are seeing it now.
The reason why I'm not
happy,
happy
that we are saved now.
No, the reason why I'm not happy is because. Can I finish? The reason why I'm not happy is because this budget statement was no different. I was expecting that, given the hindsight analysis that we've given, that this budget statement would indicate the one 2018-19 would be different, that it would signal a shift in terms of lowering. Okay, so there are three things that have defined the administration's fiscal policy. It's been aggressive increases in expenditure, subpar revenue generation, and therefore increased borrowing. Those are the three things.
Are we really discussing the same thing?
Yes,
I thought we were discussing the issue of budget monitoring.
No.
Not in terms of your own economic policy.
No. We're talking about, this conversation was partly about allocations and then about spending. I'm talking about the allocation. I'm talking about this is economic policy.
Let's discuss economic policy.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the allocation.
Now is,
Can I finish? You are allowed to speak. Let me speak, yeah?
All right.
You were given the space to speak. So those are the three things that have defined this administration: is aggressive increases in expenditure, subpar revenue generation, therefore increased borrowing. This is not a new pattern. What I'm wondering is, why did it take until today for that realization to happen? Because even development finance institutions were giving you signals last year. We had the IMF signaling, we had the World Bank signaling. Even if you don't listen to small people in the domestic economy that are signaling this, even the big boys, including Moody's, S&P, which affected our credit ratings, right, were all signaling that debt is a problem that the government has to deal with.
I want protection here. Because I find this as being unfair. Because the issue which I have just elaborately gone through is about the new mechanisms we are developing to raise the red flags in terms of budget efficiency.
She's asking, why didn't you realize until now?
She's on a completely different level, and I don't want us to get down there. If you're discussing economic policy, the issue between spending and revenue, by the way, and I've got my figures here, 2012-2013, we were on 800 billion of tax collection. Went up to 963, 1.2 by 2015-16, and now last year we were 1.4 billion, meaning that we have increased our tax collection by a whopping 79%. So nobody will tell you that over the last 5 years we have increased our tax collection by 79%. All they will tell you is how much you have borrowed.
You're spending.
And if you don't borrow,
because of your expenditure.
No, let me tell you something. If you don't spend, it's like you're supposed to sit down and not spend and wait. We go and pick up and go back home. But this kind of needs development. By the way, over that 5 years, 6,000 new kilometers of road. Over that 5 years, 2.5 million new electricity.
But at what cost?
Yeah,
at what cost?
You see now, when they were coming up with a car, some people like you are saying, why can't you give us faster horses? A government has to do what a government got to do.
Okay. All right. I'd like to discuss something else. Just briefly, then we discuss. Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to, before we forget this, there was an issue I wanted to raise with Honorable Moses Kuria. You know, he comes from the ruling party, which gave a lot of promises. Last year, they told Kenyans that we're going to reduce the cost of living to you. And they subsidized the cost of unga during the campaign period, only to take a million ton later on. Now we are paying more for unga. They are not ready to subsidize. You see this kind of what we actually call in third way, Juha Karuru politics, where you are tricking people to vote for you.
Subsidy is not the answer.
No, listen.
Producing enough food through the big for food security.
Actually,
when we want money for that,
Moses,
you don't want to give us money for that.
Why do you want to, first of all, answer before this? So what I wanted to ask you is, when you are in that budget committee, did you take into consideration that you had promised the people about a low cost of living? Because it is your law, you are not a representative of the executive, but you are a member of a party that promised low cost of living. That you cannot run away from, although you are not running the executive. So, the results of the business you do in parliament should favor the people who elected you, not the executive, because you are protecting the people from the executive.
Okay.
What did you consider when you are doing
that? It's like the executive is an animal that wants to eat the people. An executive that is there to serve the people, to give them water, road, foods, you know, this kind of...
but you see, the same people who are justifying now, tax the people more, like milk your cow 100 times today, let it die.
Ken, as a member of parliament, I had a position on the issue of taxation. And I went through my constituency. I told them, you see, I'm building that road there. See, I'm building that school for you there. We need the money. You understand? They were okay with it. But these middle class guys, now, tomorrow you'll hear them tomorrow. See, today we have said we are going to tax more on phone. Yes. By then, my people always said, please call me. So they are not affected by this one. Now you hear them tomorrow. Bank transfer, you hear them tomorrow. Because it's not my people of Gatundu who are affected. It is them. So really, this is also middle class.
No, but
middle class pretentious.
You see, you know what? No. Listen.
Let me just say something. Yes. That, listen, fundamentally speaking, that is actually absolving government of its responsibility. One of the fundamental problems that a lot of Kenyans have is that we pay our taxes for those who do. We agree with whatever it is, but what do we actually get in return? If you look at what Kenyans privatize initially, the first things Kenyans privatize is education and healthcare, right? Because we know government cannot deliver to the standard, whether I'm huko chini or huko juu. There's a fundamental problem around government standards. So what is happening is that even with these taxes that Kenyans are paying, we're not getting a delivery of service that we think warrants our taxes. We're not getting the return on investment that we are putting in our businesses, in our work. So when I am having to privatize the healthcare and education of my child or my children, it is a fundamental failure of government. And I don't see the government trying to tackle that problem. Instead, what I see is government trying to rationalize why this tax and that tax and this borrowing needs to happen. And that return is what I don't see.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to discuss something more. We are almost running out of time. Mohamed Walie, everyone is familiar with Mohamed Walie. He says, apart from the size of debt, we seem to have a serious debt management problem. It's a mix, duration, type, and cost, all on autopilot. Mix more foreign is risky. Duration reduced from 9 years to 4.5, a half of 9 years. Cost more commercial than the conventional. Big size plus mismanagement is equal to disaster. Your comment?
Yes, you know, the Constitution requires, and Chapter 12 requires that... yes, requires that the Cabinet Secretary for Finance present a statement on debt every year to Parliament, which he does, and Moses Kuria has just confirmed to us. How Parliament processes and uses that information is the most important thing. And again here, Parliament has failed fundamentally. Because one of the things is, fine, parliamentarians have been saying, specifically, especially one party has been saying that, look, debt is not bad. And maybe that's true. It's now a common chorus, actually. It's not just one party. But the point is, if your debt is becoming more expensive and the tenure is coming down, in the sense that a debt that you take for 10 years is now, under, you have to pay under 4 years, and then the quantum in terms of the total amount is going up, you're in trouble. That's a mathematical thing. That is not something you can propagandize away. That is not something you can call Ukora and it will go. That's not something that you can actually defeat in any other way. Even with a handshake, you just need proper economic management to do that. And the way to do that is for Parliament to actually say, when you present this data to us, we need a debt management plan. I'm sure a plan is presented. I mean, usually during the budget policy statement, part of that obviously talks about that our budget levels are. If you have blinkers, so for instance, internationally debt is rated, right? We have Fitch and all the others. You actually pay them to rate your debt. Just before we took our second Eurobond, our debt was actually relegated to what people call junk. I mean, in the sense that you are at a level where your interest rates will actually go up. What that required was a conversation between people who hold Parliament, who hold the executive responsible, to come and say, look, please explain to us why you are asking us to take more debt at more expensive rates. What are we not doing right? The oversight function of public finance management cannot be contracted out. It's parliamentarians who must do it.
That's why you're putting it squarely on.
Yes, especially for people who sit in the budget committee.
It's been consistent.
You know why we are squarely in the hole we are in?
Yes.
It is Parliament.
It's Parliament.
There's actually not even the president. Yes. They could have tamed looked at the numbers. We have experts like Moses Kuria who can analyze numbers. They ask, you have brought out this project 100 billion? Yes. Because I'm elected to protect my people, let me scrutinize this budget cent by cent. Okay. Cent by cent.
Don't you think the reason why they're not doing that is because the executive has a hand in...
You know when they fail in that?
Yes.
The reason they don't do that is because, I'm not saying necessarily Moses Kuria. The reason is most of our members of parliament pledge allegiance to the executive more than the people. Okay. Because in our Kenyan kind of politics, which I call the Juha Karuru politics, if you go to places like Central Province, you have to have a certain kind of allegiance to be elected. If you go to Luo Nyanza, you have to have a kind of allegiance. Even if you are a fool and you are endorsed by the king of that place, you are elected. So we end up, even if you are educated, you are a PhD, you may not give us the best, because your allegiance is not from the people. Okay. The person who will make you get elected,
I still think deal-making could be more prudent.
And it is the truth of the matter on the ground of politics in this country.
I still think deal-making could be more prudent, particularly external debt. Okay, if we look at the split between domestic and external debt, right? And we look at, because I feel you're negating the part of Treasury here, which is presenting the deal to be debated. And I really feel that there could be a lot more prudence, a lot more foresight, and a lot more scrutiny around precisely what it is that is being presented in the first place. And this is the fundamental issue, is that we have very competent individuals. If we look at their track record, their competence, their history, there's a reason they're in the positions that they're in. And the fundamental problem I'm having on the behalf of the Kenyan people is that we go through this entire vetting process for all these guys. And then when they present their presentations, we're sitting here like, is that the best deal we could have gotten? Okay. Now, the fundamental problem I'm having is, obviously this has become a China issue, and China this, China that. But if you look at the actual debt Kenya is accruing, we're accruing it from a heck of a lot of people, okay? Whether it's international capital markets, the French, the Japanese, the Chinese, the English, like we're accruing a lot of debt from a lot of people. So it's almost as though the fundamental problem I'm having is that it's almost as though we think our debt appetite will be met infinitely going forward. Okay. We have this debt appetite. When are we going to curtail this? When will this debt appetite begin to reduce? And when will we see a proper management of the debt? Because we're getting into serious fiscal problems as a result of the dynamics that we're in right now.
And that's, I'd like to ask you, when we are having this debate about external debt and all, are we ignoring something by just assuming, not talking about our internal borrowing?
No, of course. If you look, I mean, IEA did a really wonderful expose, and I really think you should look at the work that IEA has done, where they really broke down internal versus external debt. And I think that's really, I mean, just go on their site, go on their website. It's really wonderful. And they're going to be continuing to track, which I think is a very important function that Kwame and his team are doing in terms of tracking our debt. And one of the fundamental problems is that we're not beginning to delineate between the implications of the debt that we're getting into. Okay, one of the reasons why we're getting into a lot of domestic debt is because of the interest rate cap and because of heavy appetite from government, and that's being fed in, I think, a very unhealthy manner. And then we're getting into a lot of external debt because it's often cheaper, and we can pose on international capital markets and credibility. Now, what's happening, which I think the government is underestimating, is our credibility. Whether we are borrowing from domestic or international players, when our credibility gets broken, we are going to get more expensive debt. Period. And when is that likely to happen? When we default, when we are unable to pay, when we borrow too much? When is it likely to happen? We're very fast approaching the fiscal distress state that even IMF said, and I'm of the view that we've already passed that point. But we're reaching a point where our credibility as a government is being fundamentally questioned. And the minute that happens, it's more expensive for everyone.
Let me just say one thing before I get back to, before Moses responds. Moses, one of the things that I know you know it, but you should emphasize this to your colleagues and take it more seriously. It doesn't matter whether you raise tax rates or not. The moment you approve a big budget, you've raised taxes in the future. It doesn't matter.
No, it
doesn't matter.
That's my problem with my colleagues. Because the minute we pass a budget, by default,
yes, you've raised taxes.
We raise taxation.
Precisely.
Yeah, and you know, garbage in, garbage out. I mean,
but it's very consistent.
Let me address these right issues because it's quite a number. I think it's very important. One, on the issue of foreign versus domestic, I have no problem with foreign debt. I've got a very huge problem with domestic debt. And that is where the animal lies. That is the elephant in the room. And even me, as a member of parliament, I am still waiting for answers from Treasury. Why do we have these pensions for domestic borrowing? Because the impact is far much greater, the damage much greater, because we crowd the private sector from the credit market. And the result is what you say. I have got it in confidence from some of I'm a banker, from my banker friends. There are some banks which are doing nothing except T-bills. You know, every week, every 2 weeks, we have this, is it twice a week, the auctions. Yes. And I'm monitoring. The one for yesterday, 12.52. 12.52. Yeah, on the 1 year for yesterday. And then you look, I hope people, Kenyans, can be scrutinizing that auction result, because you look at how much was tendered and how much was offered and how much was taken. So government goes out there and says we are tendering for 4 billion.
They get 10.
Banks say we have given, we have 12.
Yeah.
They just take 11 by the cut off there. I have huge problems there, and that's something which even I ask in Parliament. We are going to be engaging, you know, Treasury going forward on that particular issue.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, because you know, let us discuss now the issue of the foreign debt. Along the foreign debt, the biggest problem, as this lady and gentleman have pointed out, is opaqueness. Yeah,
they don't
we need to unveil, asset by asset, item by item. And you know, even elementary, I mean, even first year university student can put our debts on a spreadsheet. And just amortize it. That's true.
But
and be able to look at how it is going to be, to have 20, 30 is something which, you know, a first year finance student can be able to do.
Okay.
You know what I think we should advise this government to do, and we will send Moses Kuria to go and tell them, because he meets them oftener than us. One, to expand the tax base in Kenya. Let this government be more creative. Getting investors on board. You know, on paper, we have had new investors in this country in the last 5 years. But that does not translate to revenues as from taxation. We give them examples like the stop exporting thiamine, process it in Kwale, employ our local people. Even if the company makes losses,
add coffee there.
Even if, Moses, I'm coming to there. Even if our local people, the company does not make corporate taxes, you get paid as yuan. Let's come to tea. A subject that I'm passionate about. I'm actually doing a draft which I think I'll look for you because of your tea thing. Let us export fully processed, packaged tea. If you package tea in this country, the value of tea multiplies 10 times, because you know England exports more tea than Kenya value-wise. Because we are a bit damp, we sell our tea in sacks. So what we need to do to kill the cartels who milk our farmers dry, then we ensure that KTDA or the factory will process the tea locally, sell it overseas. Once they make the profit, the 30% of corporate tax will get it here. Our farmer will be far much richer. Okay. Moses, can we run around this country and do that narrative with you?
Let me shock you. Today, if you want to export tea, when it's processed, let's say when it's not processed, you can go and buy it from KTDA factories, and tax-free, duty-free, you export it. If you want to do processing, first of all, you cannot go to the auction. You are persona non grata from the auction. You have to go and buy from the factory. From the factory, you pay 16%. And then you pay another 25% on packaging materials. So you end up paying, give or take,
so you'd rather
so we have got a disincentive for processing. I'm trying to tell people, Kenyans, we are trying to tell Kenyans, you look at our coffee, and I really like what this gentleman has said about this value addition. I'm trying to tell them it's not as simplistic as some people like my friend Governor Igolo are trying to put it. Because once we process our coffee here, first of all, that is one bullet that against cartels. Because the whole thing of, you know, this auction and that value chain disappears. But second, as he has put it, it's employment. It is value addition. It is taxes. It's everything. And again, 55 years after independence, some of our lazy bones are trying to tell us that it is not possible.
Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Oweru, ladies and gentlemen, we have to wind up. The clock is, ticking, and we are past our time. But I'd like to give you an opportunity to reflect on this cartoon just briefly. Then I'll give you time to summarize. Then we close the show. All right? Let's take a look at this cartoon of the week. big enough. President Uhuru Kenyatta sort of trying to stitch back the police force. I know it's been a debate since the blue uniforms were launched, but it's trying to stitch back. We brought this cartoon because that's essentially how we're trying to stitch back all the loopholes we have with our budget, right? So just comments on this, Kwame?
Well, I personally don't think that, I don't have a problem if the police and their leadership are happy with the uniforms. Then who am I to say no? So the uniforms is not what worries me. But I think in this cartoon, it's just a metaphor for the fact that we could provide them with new uniforms, but really what Kenyans need is not to patch up. We really need a police force that reflects a new ethos and that actually does service for the country and not necessarily actors for a political cause.
Okay. The fact that is the president trying to do it?
Well, it's because the president led the reforms. You remember last week when the president announced that and everything else? So in a way, showing that the president is leading in its reform, but that reform seems not to be what people think it should be. Because obviously it shows that we should actually just replace that heart as opposed to stitching it.
Moses.
Let me look at half full glass. You know, let us admit, what was announced last week was fundamental in terms of police reform, where, you know, we have all these AP structures, all these Kenya police structures, and unifying that command all the way up to world level. You can imagine the amount of the cohesion, yeah, and the predictability of that unit. That was very good. Number two, I am celebrating, and I've gone public about it again and again, the abolition of this thing called police housing. One, it was an avenue for corruption. Yeah, it was one of the biggest avenues for corruption. Now that is gone by one announcement. Two, that all these 50,000 policemen and women are going to rent houses out there is a shot in the arm for our big four housing. Because now we have got all this demand, and that is going to spur the economy. So let's look at the positives also.
Positive side. All right.
So what I see, President Uhuru Kenyatta, I think he has taken 4 years or 5 years to learn. I think he's doing well now, starting to learn how things should be done. And if he takes the same tempo, I think we may see some better things in future from him. But I'm usually really annoyed about talking about reforming the police when we are not reforming the people who lead this country. I think the president should also actually it's a good thing to initiate the reforms for the police. What about if we have an exercise to reform politicians?
Okay. That's an exercise in future.
This would be more appropriate for
which would have actually been better because, you see...
No, I think your time is done.
It's done, yes. With
so,
that,
I think this is more of an analogy of fiscal policy. If we could actually fix fiscal policy, not through the patches, but through a fundamental reinvention of how we are approaching debt, revenue, expenditure, borrowing in this country, then we wouldn't need to stitch anything. I think the government is perfectly competent in its ability to actually predict the sort of fiscal policy that we need. And the question is, why isn't that happening? That really is why we're stitching things together when we don't need to be.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have to close. Before we close here, I'd like to give you an opportunity to summarize everything in terms of what we are staring at a debate on Thursday. And I'm just wondering within your comments if you could just state, because Kenyans outside there, a lot of them are asking, what happens to us who have been paying the 16% after the 1st of September? So perhaps let's do a round, just a summary of that.
Well, I think it's been law. So if Parliament amends it, then obviously it takes effect of the day the President signs. So really there's no, unless it goes back to zero, then that would be. So because it's law, my view about this is it tells you something about Parliament in the sense that they finally agreed. It's okay to have a bipartisan effort, but my view is that this is a bipartisan effort to actually impose a tax that is unpopular among Kenyans. So maybe Kenyans should organize better and actually make sure that all parliamentarians hear our voices. Okay. That this idea that government has greater use for our money than us is something that's not convincing anymore.
All right. Moses, and also talk to us as you summarize. What happens if Parliament is able to raise the 233 or if they are not able to raise the 233? Just summarize that for us.
It will be a cold day in hell.
It will be
a cold day in hell.
If they do or if they don't.
So don't even go there. Don't even waste your time on it. It is impossible.
It's impossible.
Yeah? Don't be cheated by anyone. Okay. But there's no free lunch, Kenyans. There's no free lunch. We need development, we need those roads, we need the water, we need education. There's no free lunch. Don't be cheated by someone. We've got to go back to our pockets. Government does not have some tree where money grows money comes from taxes, and it is our taxes. Then what we need to do is to raise the bar of accountability, to raise the bar of integrity and fight against corruption, demand for service. But bottom line is we do that while still paying taxes. Okay. Finally, I do hope that all this money which we are going to raise, and this is something we are also going to take the Cabinet Secretary to task for, is going to improve cash flow in this country. Okay. Because we have put so many people, so many contractors, so many suppliers, people are not being paid by government. So therefore, the economy is grinding to a halt. In America, they pay weekly. I hope that every Monday, every person who is owed money by the government is going to be paid from this money.
Mr. Waweru.
What we need to see, and this is thinking that we have in Third Way, we need to see every citizen of this country comfortable. And comfortable in this aspect, that we don't want to see the number of poor people growing on a day-to-day basis. It has been growing since 1963. Our position on this VAT issue is a no, no, no. No tax to be imposed. Whether Parliament imposes it or not, that's a story for another day. But it's actually very detrimental to impose another tax on petroleum, knowing very well that half of our petroleum price is tax. Already.
It's tax on tax.
It's tax on tax. So what we are saying is this, the government and the members of Parliament, and I want to send Honorable Moses Kuria to Parliament. There's a petition, a memorandum from Third Way, a petition that is in the clerk's office since 16th August of this year, which proposed that they amend the VAT Act Section B of first schedule to move it back to Section A. That's such that petroleum products are exempt as they used to be. Okay. We stop this game of postponing problems 1 year after the other, because when you don't have a predictable, they are scaring even business people. Because if you don't have a predictable economy that then next year this is postponed, they may not change it. Playing politics with serious matters is not to be entertained in this country. Right. I think Kenyans should listen to this kind of narratives, and we will be able to move forward. Because when you make business unpredictable, you cannot grow.
All right. I think finally, I just think that if government does not demonstrate value for money, whether it's the Eurobond, whether it's the Chinese, whether it's the French or the British or the Americans, the questions will be the same and they'll face the same resistance. So I think the fundamental issue that I think we've talked about is the spending problem. We can allocate what we want, we can tax what we want, we can do what we want to get the money raised, but if it's not spent in a way that's accountable, the resistance will be visible and will be the same no matter what. So I think let us deal with the problem, which is the spending problem, and really get this accountability structure in place so that Kenyans actually believe that government is spending money properly.
Great, well said. Right, before we end this show, let's take some feedback now. Right, what do we have? Right, from Twitter, this is from Sitati Wasilwa. There's too much unnecessary spending in Kenya, and such wasted funds are never accounted for. That's on Twitter, Sitati. Next. Marshall Vasson, the government should not take our silence for granted. Sooner or later we'll get to a breaking point and it will be chaos. And Starving Artist says gains made in the markets, be it stock or whatever, will be eroded by inflation. We stand to lose more than we are seeking to raise. And finally, why can't we run this country as a corporate and put the likes of Kwame Owino in charge of our economy? It was a proposal even here that we should get more economists into Parliament.
Parliament would have said put the question.
Oh, Parliament should put the question. All right, and what you don't know is all of them are from business schools. Economists, and economists.
It's actually not necessarily economists, but logical people,
we have
honest people who want to drive their country
we can go back to the discussion. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And finally, as the president intensifies the war on corruption and curbing wastage, on this segment of Time Bar, we remind you of one vital move that Parliament made that was intended to frustrate the war on graft. Now, the date is the 20th of September 2007. The members of Parliament have just passed the anti-graft bill that sought to reduce the powers of the defunct Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission. On this date, the Catholic bishops, despite an appeal to retired President Mwai Kibaki asking him to reject the bill, they went further to ask the public to vote out all members of Parliament who voted for the bill. Now, the bishop claimed that the bill, quote, stripped CASA of the little power it has, effectively rendering the war against corruption a waste of time and resources, against the expectations of the public. So tonight, the voters, the public has spoken loud and clear on what they think of the 8% imposed VAT on petroleum products. They are watching tonight. Who will stand with them by forming the requisite 2/3 majority? That's enough force to reject the memorandum from the president and effectively making the amendment as it is law. Right, Moses says that will be a cold day in hell. That's a good place to end Cyber tonight. Right, thank you very much, lady and gentlemen, for coming for our show tonight. This is a conversation that continues next week. All right, and my crew, thank you very much. Good night. The feedback has been overwhelming. We can't read everything. We go off air, but remember, we're still online. We'll be looking at your tweets. Good night.